for lunch. So today I'm going to talk to you about finding funding. So Matt talked a little bit about that's one of the steps from transitioning from QI to research. And so finding funding is something that is really important in that particular step. So I'll share with you some tips and strategies for a couple of different ways that you can do that. And then I'm also going to talk more globally about really setting yourself up for research success and research funding success and capitalizing on mentorship and then the local resources that we have available to you. And so again, just to reiterate something I said yesterday, I've created this slide deck so that hopefully it's something you can go back and look at in the future. So I know that, again, the timing of this course is a little bit kind of you're learning things now that you're going to need maybe in 9 months or something like that. So on the first website, or on the Department of Pediatrics Fellowship first website, all of these talks will be posted in terms of the recordings as well as the slides, and then I'm always available to talk to you again if and when the time comes for you to do more of a deep dive into this. So here's today's agenda. So we're going to talk about finding the appropriate funders and the right agency, how you can ensure your eligibility and competitiveness, which is a very short section because that one's pretty easy, just some couple of key points for you to keep in mind. And then we'll turn and talk about the resources available to you to capitalize for your research funding success. So with the first one, so again, this is something maybe you thought, I'm not going to apply for research funding as a fellow, like my whole salary and everything's paid for. So what's in it for you? So that's what this is. Why should I care what's in it for you? So a couple things. If you do have your sights set on being an academician, it does take time to get funding. Things you can do now or little local awards can be the building blocks for what you'll eventually need. And so that funding track record really provides that competitive advantage. We used to have one of our center directors was a pediatric surgeon. His name was Mehul Raval. He's since moved on to Lurie Children's. But he was really, I mean, he's a pediatric surgeon. He was really trying to get into the funding game. Tried, and finally he got a local pilot for $50,000. Wasn't that much money, but he considers that the turning point. He said as soon as the NIH or HRQ it was said, oh my gosh, his institution is investing in him. And so then he thought that was the real turning point. And I think that it really does. If you want to be able to do some research now, it takes money to make money. So let's talk about finding funding for your research. So here's a little picture of Alexander Graham Bell and his early prototype for the harmonic telegraph. Back in those days, it was a lot easier to find funding, I would say. We didn't have all of these institutes. You didn't have to learn the game. You basically had to be well connected. So you may not know that he actually just turned around the room and looked at one of the wealthy fathers of one of his students, and even his trusty assistant, Tom Hudson. They both invested in this, and that's how he got his money. And fun fact, the wealthy father of one of his students, the student eventually became his wife. So there's always that added bonus back in those days. I don't think that happens anymore. So we're going to talk about two funding categories. One is extramural, so offered from outside the institution. Usually that's the government and the foundation grants. Or intramural, these are the pilots, and we'll talk about the Warshaw Fellow Award and a couple of others that you just should probably know about. So let's start with extramural, the ones coming from outside the institution. So it can be confusing. There's government, there's foundation, there's the NIH, American Heart, Autism Speaks, Thrasher. So it's just, there's a ton. And I'm going to give you some tips and strategies for how you can kind of wade through all of the noise and really figure out what might be right for you at different career stages. So I think the first thing is, let's go here. So let's talk about first government versus foundation. So here's some just generalities. So here in the black is just kind of like some facts and maybe some positives. So government awards are usually bigger. They have really clear guidelines. You got to play the game exactly right, kind of like with your CV I was talking about yesterday. They're very good about, like, our taxpayer dollars pay them. So they are very clear and transparent about what they fund, what are the priorities. And because we pay their salaries, the people who work there are obligated to answer our questions. Does it always happen? No, but they're supposed to. So you can feel good about bothering them and following up and being persistent, because that's their job and we pay them. Foundation, on the other hand, is a little bit more mom and pop usually. They can be good for high risk, high reward grants and career development awards because they're super specialized, and they really want to focus on funding research in this discrete area. The application requirements can be a little bit more softer and maybe not quite as rigorous. I love this third bullet on this side over here because requiring a letter of intent can be really helpful, because a lot of times you'll submit a big grant and it won't get funded, and it might be because that's not in the area of priority. The letter of intent allows you to pitch your idea first and make sure it hits the sweet spot of what they want to fund, and then you don't end up wasting your time submitting if it's really not something they were going to fund anyway. And then they can be a little bit more flexible just in terms of, oh, I don't start my second year fellowship till this date. Can we delay the notice of award and that sort of thing? So they can be more flexible. So here's the bad, right? The red here. So government awards can be super competitive and they're pretty unyielding. Like it's this way or no way. You submit your grant 1 minute late, sorry, doesn't even get reviewed. Like there's zero flexibility. Foundation, on the other hand, a lot of times the dollars are less. They can be really restrictive. They might not fund your effort, which maybe you don't care about now, but later you will definitely care about. They don't allow indirects, which are what the Emory University cares about, because for every $100 that comes to the university to fund your research, if you're in a lab, 56 extra dollars comes to Emory University to fund the buildings and the administrative staff and things like that. So Emory really cares about the indirects. And then this last one can be a tough pill to swallow, because I like to say there's never a wasted grant application, because it's always allows you to have practice continuous improvement. Even if you don't get funded, you get the gift of reviewer comments. But with foundations, you don't always get that, and can be pretty unfulfilling. I submitted a big grant to, I think it was Doris Duke Foundation, and they're just like, nope, not going to fund it. And I had no idea if it didn't match what they wanted to fund, or if they thought there was a fatal flaw. So that can be sort of disconcerting. So let's talk about a couple of examples of foundation funding for fellows. American Heart Association, even though you think, oh, I'm not a cardiologist, no worries, because they're really think about this from a broad perspective. They fund a lot of research, and as long as it's broadly related to cardiovascular function, you're good. So it could be related to stroke, could be related to the cardiac side effects of HIV. So they really have a very wide breadth and depth of research. So here's just one example, the AHA postdoctoral fellowship. I give you all the information here again in the spirit of if you wanted to go back later and take a look at it. But basically it is for postdoctoral fellows, so at your stage. And they really want to fund physician scientists. They really want to be flexible. And like I said, if you get the award in April, but you really don't have the time to dedicate till April or till July 1st, they'll delay it, no problem. The call for applications isn't open right now. They usually open in January for this award, and it's typically a July deadline. It's not a ton of money, provides money for your effort. Again, maybe you don't care that much about it, but it's more the prestige and the actual muscle memory of going through and applying for a grant and understanding how the game works. So I mentioned down here the track record about review criteria. Does the trainee have prior research experience in publications? So we'll get to that, and it's a little teaser about what's going to make you competitive for these grants. Here's another one. I love Thrasher for a lot of reasons. First, it's only for pediatric research, like what's not to love about that. They also require a letter of intent. They have a very open, flexible deadline. Twice a year, they review them. And if they want to consider you, they'll invite you to submit a grant. They're very clear on their website, telling you how many letters they receive, typically, how many they invite for applications, and how many they award. So you kind of really know, you don't waste your time. And if you do get invited, you sort of know what your chances are. It's really open to a wide variety of research topics as long as it's within pediatrics. They are highly prioritized physicians, which is also nice. The quality of the mentor and the applicant's aptitude and an inclination towards research are considered. Remember, we talked about yesterday in the BioSketch and how you can really provide that sort of flavor of who you are and what makes you tick. So that's where something like that can come through. So eligibility, you are in right now if you were interested. Another nice thing about this is there's no restriction on citizenship, which I really like. NIH, not so much. The competitiveness, publications, your actual role in developing the project, they want to see that you're taking a leadership role on this. And then, of course, prior funding, grants, and recognitions goes back to that whole thing, takes money to make money. But mentors are so important at this stage. There's one thing you take away from this first course. I think that should be one of them, is how critical it is to meet and find the mentor of your dream, because they can really provide a lot of keys to the kingdom for you. So let's switch gears now and talk about federal funding. And I'm talking a little bit fast. I'm going to try to make up some time here. So if anyone has any questions while I go through, please raise your hand or come find me at lunch and we can talk more about this. But this is actually a really old graph. You'll probably notice it looks pretty antiquated, but I really like it because it tells you kind of like where you are in your career and where you can look for these T and F awards. So these are these individual pre-doctoral or postdoctoral fellowship awards. So you can see you're right here. And typically an F32 is something that you could consider, or a T32, which is an institutional training grant on which you can apply for a slot. So the F32 is a great opportunity for postdocs and subspecialty, specialty training. I will say though, and they do really want to fund physicians, so that's super good, but it's not that much money, and you have to be doing research full-time. So that seems like sometimes with some fellowships, it's a non-starter. If you do have one of those fellowships that it's basically you have almost all protected research time and maybe the little bit of clinic you have supports your research, then you could think about something like this. This is hardcore funding and it's very prestigious. And if you're interested in this, I definitely think that there's a lot of things you can be doing now to prepare yourself for that. Finally, I'm going to talk about the loan repayment program, because being in academics, I think you have to have sort of this sense of altruism about you, about wanting to make the world a better place. I mean, you're already doctors, so you already have that. But an academic career is oftentimes not as much as private practice. So this is something to incentivize you to do research. If you're doing research and you're going to go full-fledged into the research game, then you might as well help get some of your medical school bills paid. And the loan repayment program is a great way to do that. We've had several physician scientists who've been successful at this. We've got a wonderful library available to you that if you are interested in applying for this, we can help you and show you how to play that game. It does need to be a full-fledged research project though, because it's not just about you. They actually also make sure that the research project that you're proposing is something that will help you propel you to an independent research career. Okay, I'm going to pause now. I'm going to talk to you about how to find all of these great opportunities. Maybe the ones I showed you, none of them speak to you, or maybe you want to learn more about them. So how would you go about finding more research funding? So there's a lot of different ways. So talked yesterday about the best predictor of future behaviors, past behavior. So when you're reading publications, they have to have a section about who supported the research. So you can look, was it NIH? If it was, which institute? Was it a foundation? Was it an internal award? So whatever is cited as in your publication that's in the field that you're interested in, that's something that you should look into more. Ask your colleagues, ask your mentor, ask your grant administrator. What's kind of a grant that you've seen a lot of people have success with? And then you can also search the databases if you go on to, go to NIH Report, which reports all of the NIH and government funding from a variety of areas since the beginning of time. And you put in your keyword and you see which institutes have funded your research. You can find a lot that way too. PCORI, same thing. There's the link. Another way, if you're just like want to dip your toe in the water, is to find funding passively. So just make sure you're signed up for all of the great different listservs and whatnot that will routinely send you funding announcements of interest to you. So in pediatrics, we have this thing called the PrEP, which is Pediatric Research Events and Programs. That's our weekly newsletter. Gives you just a digest of everything happening during the week, all the great seminars, all the great funding opportunities. What's Up is the equivalent in Department of Medicine, which I actually subscribe to as well, because they have a lot of good things in there as well. The Georgia CTSA is something that Jocelyn Grunwell talked about yesterday. They've got the translational certificate, they've got the KL2, they've got a ton of different programs, but they also do a weekly digest each week, and they'll talk about their programs as well. And I'm going to talk more about that translational certificate. I added a slide in here, so in case people want to learn more. You can also create a Grant Forward and Foundation Directory profile. What's that? I'm going to tell you, so stay tuned. Then the government, also NIH, has a weekly table of contents. You can subscribe to different institutes within NIH to get something more specialized. So there's a lot of different ways. You just got to get on the right listserv, and then you got to read your emails, of course. Okay, so I told you I was going to tell you more about Grant Forward and Foundation Directory Online. These two databases are treasure troves. They're very expensive, but Emory subscribes to them. So you have those keys to the kingdom. With your Emory NetID and password, you can enter into them and spend an afternoon just looking at all of the funding opportunities. Doesn't that sound like fun? Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you a little snapshot of what it's like to go into these funding databases, and wanna give you a sampling of the different kinds of approaches that you can use to find the funding that's most relevant to you. And then I also want to show you some of the details that you can uncover, especially Foundation Directory Online. You can really take a peek under the covers of all these different foundations. Quite interesting. So we're going to start with Grant Forward. It used to be that Grant Forward was just for government and Foundation Directory Online was just for foundation. But things have kind of blurred, and they actually supposedly both do both. But I will tell you, I can find some things in Grant Forward that I can't find in Foundation Directory Online, and vice versa. So I think it is best to use both of them together. So here's just some screenshots of some searches I did. So I searched for autism and found 83 results in 0.2 seconds. It's very exciting. But look at this. Here's Rochester Area Community Foundation. That's a no-go. We're not in Rochester. So I knew that by looking at it that was a local opportunity. And there's a scholarship. I don't want that either. So what you can do is do this powerful drill down where you can tell it, no, I don't want fellowship, scholarship. Look at that, the green disappears. How interesting. You can do this. You don't want fellowship, scholarship. You do want research, and I said you didn't want the rest of these. So let's see what happens. Oh, also, sponsor type, I said I didn't say I didn't want corporate and international, but I picked everything else, different way to do it. I said I only wanted to focus on the United States, and that I didn't want undergraduate or international. And then I also, you can say if you want a certain amount. So when I applied all those filters, I drilled down, I got less results, 36, which is definitely doable. And look at that, the Simons Foundation. That's a great research funding opportunity for autism research. Here's another one, an NIH one, an R03, which is also just a really small 2-year award from the NIH. So it's another great hit. But it's still not perfect, because even though I said no fellowship, scholarship, I still got this fellowship. So kind of annoying, but it's a small price to pay for all this great information. All right, now, so that was Grant Forward. The other database is Foundation Directory Online. I skimmed over this, but let me just say for a moment that Grant Forward, you just go on Grant Forward, and anybody off the street can actually do searches. But as I said, you have to sign in with your Emory credentials, and that gives you superpowers. Foundation Directory Online is a bit more complex to get to. I'll show you in a bit. We have a website where it gives you these directions. But basically, you have to go on to this health.library.emory.edu. You find databases. and then you plug in, you type in Foundation Directory Online, and then that's how you get to it. So it's a little bit more convoluted, but it will be worth your time, I promise. Because it's great foundation as well as government. It's not exclusive to research, so you get some kind of crazy things about different art awards, but it's easy to kind of, again, drill down and pick out what you want. So I did the same thing with Foundation Directory Online, search for autism. Oh my gosh, like that's crazy. It's not gonna take you an afternoon, it's gonna take you a week if you really wanna go through 17,000 grant makers. So that's a no-go. So what you can do, there's lots of little tricks. You can exclude grant makers not accepting applications. And when you do that, okay, well, it's still a lot, but it's a lot better at least. Like, I don't know why they even have that on there. I guess it's because if you want to go in and just find out maybe doesn't matter if they're not giving applications right now, but that's what we care about today. So some other filters, you can say, okay, I just want research and evaluation. I just want things that you can apply for in the United States. And then maybe you can say, I don't want those piddly little grants. I'm going to set the minimum at $100,000. So that's what that is. And that's 191. Okay, that's still probably not something I want to spend my time going through, but you get the point that it gets a lot better. So here's an excerpt of that list of 191. And I really like it because you can see is the name, their total assets. So like, do they even really have money to give out? What their total giving was, the grant count. So super useful information because some of these you come through and the dollar amounts are so small that it's really obvious that it's not worth pursuing. So even though you've never heard of some of these, some of them seem pretty decent. And the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in particular, because the total assets are so big, I highlight that one because you're like, okay, this is legit. This is something that maybe is worth looking into a bit more. And guess what? You can do that through this tool. It's very interesting. So it's got all this wonderful dashboard, tells you exactly what's being funded. So health means research, but there's also some other areas, education, that could be another one. Where's the money going? Check this out. It's like this heat map. In Georgia's pretty dark. So that tells you, okay, they like to fund things in Georgia. They like to fund researchers in Georgia anyway. And then how big are the grants? Gives you an idea of scope and scale. So that's Foundation Directory Online. I will say that you don't really even need to use these databases. I've given you sort of the breadcrumbs on how to find them, but you can just Google it. So if you would Google research funding, fellowship funding in nephrology, the first thing that pops up is this ASN grant that a lot of our nephrologists have gotten in the past. So it doesn't have to be super sophisticated. You can find what you need pretty easily. All right, that is extramural. I'm going to pause for just a second, catch my breath. Does anyone have any questions about those online directories or strategies for finding funding? Okay. We will go to intramural. So I love this section for you all because I think it's a really viable way for you to sort of learn the grantsmanship game. We have tons of support available to you to really kind of figure it out and do a dress rehearsal before you go out to one of the government or the foundations. And as I said, another valuable lesson, including that your mentor is the key to the kingdoms. It does take money to make money. That's just sort of how the world works, right? All right, so these pilots are typically smaller. The ones we offer go up to about the upper limit's about 50,000, but we go all the way down to 2,500, and that's the Buchter Resident Research Awards. The Warsaw Fellow Awards are 5,000. So as I mentioned, you can join these relevant listservs to learn about them. And then I also provide a bunch of links for you. We have a full inventory of many of the ones available to you on pedsresearch.org, which I'm going to show you in a little bit here. Medicine, our partners over in medicine, our colleagues over in medicine, they have tons of great information as well. So I always like to look at what they're posting. OSP, which is our Office of Sponsored Programs, which is at Big Emory. I will just say it this way, I provide their link too. I won't comment on the quality of what they post. All right, so here is one example of local pilot funding called the University Research Committee. This thing has been around since I've been at Emory since 1996, and I think it's been around that long as well. And interestingly, the amount they offer is still exactly the same, $30,000. So it's not a ton of money. They don't allow PEI effort on it, so that's a huge limitation. But it's very reliable. It's due every January, and they give out a lot of awards. I chaired one of the committees, and we got 3 awards in our committee, and they funded all 3 of them. So, I mean, it's going to vary. I'm sure it's not always a 1-for-1, but look at that. Got to be Emory faculty. And they are hardcore about that. We have this new sort of faculty equivalent kind of title called a research scientist now. Nope, they won't do that. You have to be full-time faculty. We had somebody who was a 0.8 FTE. Nope. So they're really inflexible. They're more like government when it comes to that kind of thing. But no fears, because you can pair up with a mentor. And this happens a lot. This is really a great way to tie hitch yourself to somebody who is eligible and will probably end up letting you do a bunch of work, which is kind of, in this case, something you want, but hopefully will oversee it and partner with you to make sure that you're submitting a quality proposal. So you can learn good grantsmanship. And then the other thing is when you apply eventually for like a K or a career development award, the reviewers really want to see that this mentor is committed to you and that you have a good chemistry and that you can produce together. And so having publications and a track record together is the best way to show that. So here's the Warschaw Fellow Research Award. It is such a fantastic opportunity. It's typically, you could apply for it in your first year if you want. Some people do. Or you could apply for it in your second year. Or you could apply both. Some people do that as well. So the research does need to be hypothesis driven. This is our opportunity. Our research office is our ability to say, if you want to do the game, you need to really put together a well-crafted proposal. So we're not giving away money. It must be a discrete project, and it's something that we actually do a full peer review process on. So it is, I'm not going to say a lot of work, but it is a fair amount of work. But remember, I talked about the continuous improvement. We will give you feedback in order for you to be able to use that, whether or not you reapply for the Warschaw Fellow or something else. It's our gift to you, is to give you this feedback. The deadlines are typically right around April 1st, so you'll be hearing a lot more about that right after the new year. All right, so I promised you we'd talk a little bit about eligibility, competitiveness. It's very easy. You got to have research effort available. Remember yesterday, Jocelyn talked about how you needed to have a letter that stated you have this X amount of research effort, and it needs to be in writing. So similar in this case, you need to make sure you have the time to devote to it. And that's really to protect you. We want to make sure that you're successful in doing this research. And if you don't have protected time, it's not like it can happen magically. Really need to find that good mentor match, looking at the research interest, their own track record in research and training. Some of our residents have their mentors and who are wonderful people and fantastic clinicians, but they don't have a research track record. We have I should mention, we have a research track for residents. And so I'm talking about that group there. So we always try to say, you know what, this is a great mentor. We want you to stick with that mentor, but let's add to the mentor team of somebody who does have research grant funding. They need to have the time to devote to you. And I think that personality and work and sort of work style can go a long way as well. And then, as I mentioned, having a mentor and working with them in this way now helps you have that track record of publications and the proof is in the pudding that you can work together. Okay, so we're going to spend the last couple of minutes on using your resources and capitalizing on the outstanding research environment to maximize your funding success. So I'm not going to go over the same slides that Lucky did on Monday, but suffice it to say, we do have a ton of outstanding researchers here in pediatrics and honestly in the Pediatric Institute. And so already know by now that we're #1 in NIH funding for 2020 in departments of pediatrics. There are so many researchers available to you, not just in the Pediatric Institute, but at CDC, Georgia Tech, Morehouse. And so I'm going to share with you some strategies on how you can tap into all of those mentors and potential mentors, as well as the different training programs we have available to help you with the grantsmanship game. All right, so first, let me start big at Emory at least, right? So there's this entity called the Woodruff Health Science Center, Emory University. Like, what is that? It's kind of this strange concept, but what you need to know is, Emory's got all of these different schools. It's got business school, law school. It's got Emory College, right? School of medicine, school of nursing. So what the Woodruff Health Science Center does, it says, everything that's related to health-related research, we're going to put under this one umbrella. And they have their own leadership structure and stuff like that. But there's these five areas that are encompassed under Woodruff Health Sciences Center: School of Medicine, School of Public Health, School of Nursing, the Yerkes National Primate Research Center, and Winship. Now, of course, in Department of Pediatrics, as well as all the other departments within the Pediatric Institute. So that means that maybe somebody's in surgery, but they have their clinical privileges at Children's, they're in the Pediatric Institute typically. We're all within the School of Medicine. But in addition to that, in addition to Emory up here, so I just showed you Emory, we've got these wonderful partners. Maybe there's some people at Children's who don't have an Emory affiliation. Doesn't matter. We consider them all in. People at Georgia Tech do really cool research that can be applied to pediatrics. Awesome. We count them in. The Georgia CTSA, which is sort of this infrastructure grant that provides tons of research opportunities and as well as funding, we count them in. So anybody who's doing child health related research in the Atlanta area is our friend, and we count them in, and they're eligible for our pilots and to use our course. This is, we hired a graphic designer to really try to encapsulate who we are, and this is what he came up with, and I think it's glorious because it's very complicated if you don't have a visual like this. But basically what you can see here is here in the vertical space are clinically focused centers, okay? So we've got Wade Almond yesterday talked about Aflac Cancer and Blood Disorder Center, HEMONC. Tom is part of Center for Childhood Infections and Vaccines. So you can see all of these different areas that are more like clinically focused and relevant. They're virtual. They're designed to bring people together who are interested in mobilizing and discussing and collaborating on research in these general areas. Then we also have in the horizontal space these integrative research centers. These are more about methodologies as well as approaches to research that could be applied to any disease or condition. So we've got clinical and translational research, so really best practices in clinical trial design, as well as navigating all of the horrible research administrative issues that come from Emory partnering with Children's. And I'll say this afternoon, we have Tal Senior coming to talk about using EPIC data in research. The Center for Clinical and Translational Research can help sort of navigating that as well. Center for Clinical Outcomes Research in Public Health, you can bet that Matt Lynham is a member of that center. Ann Merton's the director of that. Pediatric Cellular Therapies, very cool. I don't know if you all know this, but there's going to be a GMP facility at the new hospital when it opens in 2024 or whatever it is. So that's super exciting because Children's is really, they're just dedicated to being cutting edge and making sure that we have the best treatment available to kids. And so the work that that center is doing across all disease areas is just going to be pivotal and really creating a nice foundation. Pediatric Technology Centers is what's really emblematic of our relationship with Georgia Tech. And if you want to develop an app or test a device or develop a device or whatever, anything related to engineering and computer science, we can connect with them, and we've got great relationships with them as well. And then finally, I'll tell you a little bit more about these research cores that are resources that maybe something not every researcher needs their own biostatistician, but when they need one, they need one. And so we have that available to people if they just want to try to get things moving in the right direction. Okay, so I know this probably all sounds great, but as we keep alluding to, one day I hope that you'll go, wait, what was that we learned in first? And so you can go to the website and look at all of the pre-recordings and the slides, but maybe you don't want to do that. So for most of what I talk about, you can go to pedsresearch.org. And so this is a wonderful resource that we like to say is your one-stop shop for all things pediatric. PedsResearch.org does not have Emory in the title, does not have Children's, Georgia Tech, Morehouse, no. It's institute agnostic, and we like it this way for a very practical reason, because it gives us full power to put whatever we want on there. We don't have to like clear it with people. And we're, of course, very professional, and we make sure that the information is very relevant and highly valuable, but we control it. We don't have to work within the constraints of whatever website Emory uses or Children's uses. So I'm going to show you a couple of things about the website that you might like to know about. So there's a faculty directory. You can go under people. You can browse by area of research. There's a drop down there. You can browse by those different centers. I showed you the ecosystem. You're like, I want to learn more about the CF researchers. You click on CF Air, and then everyone who's affiliated with that center or a member of that center pops up. You can also look at research funding. So remember, I showed you all of those different databases, right? Well, how the heck do you get back to those? It's so confusing. Well, that's okay. You just click on this little link here, and it will open it up, and it gives you instructions on how to get to Grant Forward and Foundation Directory Online. The other thing it does is it goes, you can look at all of the pilot programs available to you. So we've got probably, I don't have a picture of it up here, but maybe like 10 of them listed there. Not all of them would be relevant to you, but it's still worth checking it out. And when you go there, you can learn more about the Warshop Fellow Research Award and the Book Resident Research Award. It'll give you the latest deadline information, kind of remind you about what the amounts are, what the expectations are. This is just one tiny heading to the whole thing. There's great information about what are the FAQs and what are the templates and what are the grantsmanship resources, how to apply, past awardees. Remember, we talked about if you want to apply for this, it's always great to go back and see, well, which of my buddies or which of the people in my division have gotten these in the past. Maybe I can get their application to use as a template since they were successful. This grantsmanship resources, though, I think is really relevant to you all. And I really want to encourage you to make the time to use these. I'm here to tell you that each year we do little workshops to help people with their biosketches or help them with their hypotheses. And it's really, the people who come are highly engaged and typically get the award, but not a lot of people take advantage of that. And I get it, it's time and whatnot, but it is very high value activity, and I encourage you to consider it when you hear about those. So also on the research resources page, planning for research, here's a bunch of different tools. Again, funding opportunities, mentoring, grant writing, project feasibility. Now this, I'm just gonna be honest, is super like 101 stuff, but it's just a nice reminder of crafting a successful research proposal. You've been busy in clinic, sharpening your clinical skills, and now all of a sudden you have to write this research proposal. Well, this really just kind of level sets you and reminds you, these are the steps that I need to take to sort of shift over into the research mindset. So just little tricks like that. Grant writing, I mentioned all the workshops that we have available. We also have this monthly K Club, which is been going on since 2009 now. It's highly popular for people who are interested in developing their own research careers, and you are welcome to come to that anytime. It's typically the second Monday of the month. We also have the GEMS Core, which Jocelyn, I got to pay her because she teed up so much of this stuff nicely, but our grant editing and manuscript support core. And here's what the GEMS Core does. There's a link. It has all of the services. It can help you with simple things like format editing, like to the journal, specific journal where you want to apply or submit your manuscript. Technical editing, they'll just do a English language proofreading of the final penultimate draft. Or if you then want to get strategic advice, we can offer that too. And there's two different ways to request services. One's through the grant service request form and the other's through the manuscript request form. Biostatistical support. Very, very important. It is never a good idea to collect your data and then send a spreadsheet to a biostatistician and say, here, what's significant? They hate that, and that has been done before, and we really try to guard against that. It is never, when is it too early to contact your statistician? Is it ever too early? No. I'll answer that for you. It's never too early to contact your statistician. And the director of the core is going to be here tomorrow, Shasha Bai, I think it's tomorrow. And so you'll get to learn a whole lot more about the biostats core. But basically, this is what they do. Everything bread and butter related to statistics. And they also have a way to easily request support. They also have a qualitative arm. Just thought I'd mention that. Pretty cool. Qualitative analysis, survey design, doing interviews, that sort of thing. This is just a quick list of all the other cores that we have, that we offer. Many of them are basic science focused. The GEMS core is fully subsidized. The biostats core is partially subsidized. All of these cores are partially subsidized. So we figure out how much it costs to actually use the services, and typically we cover about 20 to 40% of the costs. Finally, I'll just talk a little bit about the news and events page. I mentioned the PREP, which is the Pediatric Research Events and Programs, which is a weekly digest that tells you everything that's going on. But you can also check our website, and it gives you just a quick snapshot. You can see here we've got Grand Rounds next week. Our HERO Heart Center has a faculty candidate coming in November. Childhood Infections Infections and Vaccines virtual seminar is in November, an all-day, half-day symposium, and then CORF, which is our outcome center, actually has a seminar coming up as well. That'd be pretty cool. Okay, I threw this slide in at the at 6 a.m. this morning, just so I could speak to this directly. So the Georgia CTSA, as I mentioned, is an NIH-funded infrastructure grant. It used to be at Emory, and we would sort of partner with Georgia Tech and Morehouse. Well, now, the last time they funded the grant, it's for all of Georgia. The main partners are Emory, Georgia Tech, Morehouse, University of Georgia, but it's a whole other, if you're in Georgia in an institution, you're in. Here's a little snapshot of their education and training. This is what Jocelyn was talking about yesterday, the certificate program in translational research, which is kind of a, I'm not going to say watered down version, but a less intense version of the Masters of Science in Clinical Research. It is 16 credits. Here's the link. It's for people who really want to focus on the interface of translational research, sort of the bench to bedside, if you will. In my experience, it's typically the PhDs who want to learn more about the application of their science to clinical experience that engage in this, but it is for MDs as well. And I talked to Jocelyn yesterday, or whenever it was, and she confirmed that, yeah, you're right, it's not typical that MDs do it, but there are some MDs who do it. So it's not unheard of, and you can see here they are eligible. You can take the coursework over a single year or spread it over 2 years. The next deadline is in April of next year. So, okay, let me just go through this. I've almost made up the time. There are multiple ways to find funding opportunities, and I can help you with that, or you can use the tools I've shared with you today. Research road mapping is what I'm saying when today you need to think about where you need to be in 5 years, and you need to start laying the groundwork for that now. Tons of valuable information for you that you are eligible and entitled to receive on pedsresearch.org. And we do have the sort of what we call concierge services. If you get to a dead end and can't figure this out on your own or get frustrated, just come talk to me. We've got a great team in place who know a lot about our research operations, and we are really happy to engage with you and help you with your research journey. And with that, I will end, and let's do this.